Hello, everyone. Here we have our first big patch since I've been back. It's only been a few days. I picked a great time to come back. And we see a bunch of nerfs, no buffs. No buffs in patch 23.4.3. Massive card updates. Really focused on Warrior. I think they probably went a little overboard, pun intended, with nerfing Warrior here, but we'll see exactly why that is in a second. So, I did also look at a Twitter thread from one of the initial design people, and they were really emphasizing, like, look, this is a lot of it's statistically based, but a lot of it is also feel, right? They are high power level cards, all of them, but some of them were not high enough to warrant a nerf based on power level alone. A lot of them were also based on feel, and I get that. I totally get that. I think, well, I'll tell you what I think at the end when we review everything. So, first up, we have Shield Shatter going down to 4 damage from 5. Um, yeah, that's a pretty big breakpoint in today's meta, right? 5 damage, there would be a lot of ways to get a 5 health minion on board. Think Naga Mage, all their Naga were 5 or under. Some of them were exactly 5. That's different now. Mech Paladin, Holy Paladin, even, that 5 damage was a pretty big breakpoint. So going down to 4 is a pretty substantial nerf, right? Brings it more in line with other board clears. Honestly, I always thought it was a little too easy to achieve the Shield Shatter early, especially with Frozen Buckler. So I think that that was definitely a good nerf target. I did accurately predict a few of these nerf targets, but I missed a lot. And I also had some that I thought Wig Priest was going to get hit. Spoiler, it does not. So this patch will be live by the time I do this video, or by the time this video is uploaded, rather. So keep that in mind. This Shield Shatter nerf is going to be pretty big, I think. Tidal Revenant going from gain 5 armor to gain 8 armor, or rather, other way around, going from gain 8 to gain 5. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think that Tidal Revenant was slightly overtuned. Mostly it was fine. I was kind of expecting it to not get nerfed, honestly, but it's fine that it did. This next one, though, this next nerf is, you could say it's a colossal nerf. Nellie's pirate ship, new death rattle. Add Nellie's pirate crew to your hand. They cost 1 less. Absolutely, absolutely destroyed this card. I think that it was, a power outlier for a long time. It was so versatile. It was so useful in aggro. It was so useful in control. I think that making it just so they cost 1 less instead of costing 1 is a monumental nerf to its power, because what you would do with Nellie's pirate ship is you would load up on big pirates and play them all for cheap. Um, I do think it's still going to be okay. The problem was that you were including it in every single warrior deck no matter what, because it was so good. Now I think it'll still have a purpose. I don't think it's literally unplayable, because, for example, if I play a 2-drop pirate, it costs 1 less. Hey, and 1 mana, 2/2 draw pirate, sure. 2 mana, 2/4 gain 3 armor at the end of your turn, sure. Those are fine. They are perfectly okay. This is not an amazing legendary anymore. It's not the top tier colossal that it was. It's no longer, S tier. But it is fine. Remember that, just because it was, I think it was just that powerful that hitting it this hard makes it still better than a lot of other colossals, like the Druid one. God help Kolak, right? So there are a lot of there's a lot of implications here for Warrior. We're not even through all the nerfs yet. They've already hit 2 of their strongest cards, right? And they're about to hit another one of their strongest cards from the depths, going to 4 mana. So they have a bit of their rationale here. And I think this is talking about all their warrior stuff, so I'll just read through it real quick. They're talking about control and charge warrior being way too strong, way too high win rates. So they nerfed sort of their shared cards from the depths, Nellie, right? That led to the most frustration. So you can no longer get that one cost Smite, which would really enable the Charge Warrior combo. Never mind about how generally strong it is. You could activate your combo as Charge Warrior a few turns early if you otherwise had the pieces in hand. Maybe you would only need one to the front, for example. So it was really enabling a lot of pretty feel bad strategies on top of just being way too high win rate. So I agree with all of these nerfs. I think they are all fine nerfs. Maybe not all of them back to back to back, right? I think if you nerfed, for example, from the depths, maybe you didn't have to nerf Nellie as hard, or since you nerfed Shield Shatter, maybe you didn't have to nerf Tidal Revenant, right? Um, so there's some consideration there. I think that this is Warrior losing a lot of power all at once, so much so that it might just not be viable anymore. We'll see for sure, but I mean, we can see as soon as I start streaming, right? But again, I'm a little nervous about Warrior being any good right now because this is a really, really hard hit. Caria Felsoul going to 7, this makes sense. Dropping her on 6 was just too much. It's too hard to deal with. Plus, there were ways to cheat her out, right? So, bumping her to a 7 mana 7/7. You don't really care about the stats. The strat was to get your Colossal out early. Now you still can get it from your deck. It's basically a duplicate of your Colossal, right? Caria Felsoul was basically used as a way to run 2 of a legendary rather than for any real effect herself, right? You basically double the chance of getting that legendary. It had the slight upside of giving it a bigger body. Now, since it costs more, you still have that effect of like, hey, you know, I'm basically running 2 of this one thing that I really, really want. And that's fine. But overall, I mean, slowing it down is good. I think it was a little too fast. I think this was probably a necessary nerf, a correct nerf. That said, I can craft Caria Felsoul and try out that deck and just dust her later for free. So that'll be good. I just need to remember to do that within the 2-week period. So maybe I won't do that because I will definitely forget. Battleworn Vanguard going down to 2/1 from 2/2. Yeah, I mean that makes sense. So I mean it was just a little overtuned, right? Make it easier to kill. That's fine. Making sure it doesn't stick. I mean the big problem is like those 1/1s, like on 2 you might play a 3/2 or a 2/2 yourself. The 1/1s can trade, keeping the Vanguard alive, generating more value, right? They mentioned that, you know, they wanted to lower the odds that it sticks to prevent snowballing. Makes sense. This is Wildpaw Gnoll. This is another nerf that I predicted. Yeah, there was a reason it was nerfed in the first place. That's what we learned. A lot of people were saying, hey, it was only really a problem with Secret Passage. Maybe this will go away. But turns out that that's kind of not the case. Turns out it's still just a little too strong. Mostly enabled by the tradable cards in Rogue, right? Class-specific draw that isn't actually going to activate Maestra. Pretty good, right? So bringing down Wildpaw to a 3/5 again makes a lot of sense. Now, Lightforged Cariel, this is one I didn't see coming. And I don't know necessarily that it had to happen. I know I've talked about the win rate statistics on Cariel before, where like it's a 7 mana card and you want to keep it in the mulligan. Like there's probably something wrong there, right? So the idea that Cariel is a statistical problem is definitely there. Maybe not quite high enough for them to nerf. I don't know what their thresholds are. I don't know how their analysis goes or what their data set is. Well, their data set is the entire game, I guess, because they own it. But they said themselves, like, yeah, Paladin is in a pretty healthy spot, but this was described on Twitter as a feel change more than a power change, but it's definitely always both, right? And I think I agree with this one, just because, like I said, why are you're keeping a 7 mana card in your opening and it's like the best card you can keep? That's not good. That's bad, right? We don't want that. So Spitelash, they are pushing back the combo turn to turn 5 rather they're making the combo turn much harder. So by delaying, may just pop off one turn. They are hoping that it can actually, you know, give other decks a chance to fight back. Um, I think that makes sense. I think that makes a lot of sense. Giving it the compensatory health is really funny because Shield Shatter, which was one of the bigger threats against this, now only deals 4, so it almost doesn't need it. Obviously, it does need it. 5 mana 2/5 would feel bad, but overall, I think this is definitely necessary. Again, definitely one of those feel ones. I'm not making that up. I did look it on Twitter in that thread. So I can definitely tell this is one of those feel ones. Naga Mage wasn't an amazing deck by any means. It wasn't a standout. It wasn't a particularly bad power outlier. But Spitelash Siren probably should cost 5. That feels right to me. Earthen Scales. This is what I didn't see coming at all, just because I don't play that much Druid anymore. But bumping it to 2 mana, I mean, it makes sense, right? Give a friendly minion +1/+1 is typically considered a 1 mana effect. And then gaining 5 armor is a 1 mana effect. So on average, you're probably gaining about that much. Makes sense for it to cost 2. It was really powerful back in the day. It's really powerful now. Wait, look at this. They used the Ungoro art. They picked the Ungoro version instead of the standard version. That's funny. The little dino footprint there. Anyway, point is, this card probably should be pushed to 2. It was always really strong at 1, and it never felt this bad. But as other things have scaled up, for example, the ability to just plop a huge attack minion on board. Obviously, Linecracker, Druid, and Wild had always been a thing. But this particularly is, in Standard, it's an issue, right? Because of how other things have power crept, this sort of scaled with the power creep, right? And that's not a great thing to find in your game. Our next one is something people would have wanted in Standard long ago, but since it was causing such an issue in Wild, they finally did it. Lightning Bloom now refreshes 2 mana crystals and still overloads 2. Absolutely demolishing this card. This is still nice. Being able to refresh 2 mana crystals is nice. I don't know if it's going to stay at Overload 2. I'm not going to lie. I would not be surprised if this goes down to Overload 1. I think it's probably still like playable at Overload 2 because often you just do not care if like, oh, if I'm going to win this turn, why do I care about Overload? That's always been the case with Overload. That's why it's hard to balance. But refresh 2 mana crystals is just not that good of an effect. That's like if Prep had Overload on it, right? I don't know. It feels very weak now. Feels very, very weak. I think it could still be used, but it's just not amazing. Definitely not amazing. What's ironic though is that in Standard, Druid was the one really taking advantage of Lightning Bloom, but in Wild it's been Shaman. Big Shaman specifically has dominated the meta in Wild, and you almost can't go on the subreddit without finding a post about it. So glad they had this nerf coming. They probably earned it. Wild goes through it before things get nerfed or removed, whichever the case may be. So definitely a necessary change. Mr. Smite up to 7. I mean, he was kind of just Leroy before. Now he's like slightly worse Leroy. I think putting him to 7 mana is... I'm trying to think if it hits any major breakpoints. Are there any like big pirate plays? I mean, not now that Nellie's been nerfed. Maybe it's not an alternative win condition in Charge Warrior anymore. Although, again, Warrior has been nerfed into the ground, so I think that was irrelevant anyway. So I think that this will definitely make Mr. Smite not the ubiquitous card that he was. I also think that Mr. Smite could definitely see play again with proper pirate support, right? So I'm just thinking about this in terms of like nerfing Nellie again, because if you still had your 1 mana pirates from Nellie, let's say you just couldn't get Mr. Smite or something, you could play Smite at 7 and then 1, 2, 3, all your pirates, and that would be a cool combo because it's like, oh, I used all my mana, I did all this other stuff. I had to wait until 10 mana to do this combo. That would definitely feel good, but that's just not an option anymore. If I can still play Mr. Smite and play like a small crew, which I guess is kind of more in line with what pirates tend to be anyway, I think like making these mid-sized pirates is not that it's a bad thing, but it's definitely different than how pirates have been treated historically, right? Like Sky Captain Crag was one of the biggest pirates ever. He was huge. He was a 4/6, right? Or like Greenskin was supposed to be your capstone in pirate, and he was a 5/4, and he had only an immediate effect on your weapon. Mr. Smite is a fat charge guy, and we have other 5 attack pirates. We have other 4 attack pirates, right? Pirates with special effects like the Cannoneer. So I think that pirates getting reined in a little bit makes sense, and putting your biggest, baddest pirate at a higher mana cost makes sense because he's like this big captain guy, right? So I don't know. Overall, definitely necessary. Smite was a little ubiquitous for my liking. He was just kind of everywhere and not in a good way. And he felt bad to lose to, which is, again, ultimately what this comes down to, right? Last one, School Teacher. This makes a lot of sense. Speaking of ubiquity, School Teacher was in like every deck because everyone likes to discover spells. Everyone likes to be able to play a 3-mana spell for 1 mana and not lose tempo because School Teacher used to be a 5/4. A 5/4 that lets you discover a 3-mana spell and play it for 1 mana with a 1/1 body attached. That's a little silly. So overall, and I was waiting to bring this up. I did want to bring this up earlier when I was talking about From the Depths, but From the Depths going to 4 means you can't generate extra copies off of School Teacher now. So again, another nerf to Warrior. School Teacher, I absolutely agree with the dev analysis here. School Teacher was just premium Battlecry, premium stats, right? Premium Battlecry is fine, but you should sacrifice some tempo for it. If this were printed a few years ago, this would be like a 2/2 that generates a spell in hand. It wouldn't even give you a body attached to it, right? It would so I think this nerf makes a lot of sense. So these cards will be eligible for dust refunds. So I guess that excludes School Teacher, which is fine, honestly. As well as I think it would only exclude the golden version of School Teacher. I think that's how that would work. As well as this is, if you still have your wild copies of Earthen Scales, you can disenchant those. I think that would be those would be the only ones where it gets a little funky. Yeah, okay. So overall, we are looking at some pretty solid nerfs here. I think a lot of them, in isolation, they all make sense. I think maybe they went a little overboard with Warrior. Warrior was a very dominant class, though, overall. So maybe I don't care too much about the changing of the guard here. I also think that we might see a pretty big slowdown in the meta because Rogue is getting taken down a little bit. Demon Hunter is getting taken down a little bit. Obviously, Warrior getting taken down. That was a control archetype, so maybe not. But Smite, I mean, you know, that could be the difference between every aggro deck ever running Smite just as a finisher and not. He is still 6 damage on a stick, so might be good. I'm unsure about Smite's place in the metagame now. He might just cost slightly too much. That might be too late for a capstone for an aggro deck, and he might not give enough value to mid-range. But we'll see. We'll see. School Teacher, I think, is still going to see play, especially in Naga Priest, for example. And I did want to touch on Naga Priest briefly, because that's the deck I've been rocking lately. And it is busted. It is frankly so strong. And Wig should absolutely be a +1/+1, not a +1/+2. Because it just enables Bless combos. And that is so unfair. Even at +1/+1, it's still good. But that wraps it up for these nerfs. By the time this video goes live, I will be streaming. Also, I plan to stream somewhat regularly for the foreseeable future. So go ahead and check out my Twitch. Subscribe here if you want to see more of this coverage, as well as other videos. I'm sure I will put something together. More tier lists. Those seem to always do well. I enjoy doing them. Maybe some Mercenaries content. No? Okay, yeah, I didn't think so. So anyway, go ahead and check out the stream. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you in the next one.